Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Musings From The Mount podcast, where we explore the intersection of spirituality, psychology, and global consciousness. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. In today's fast-paced world, we're constantly bombarded with noise, information, and distractions. But what if the key to unlocking our true potential lies in the spaces between? Join us as we explore the profound power of silence and receptivity. From aligning with natural rhythms to embracing the beginner's mind, we'll discover how creating space for stillness can lead to personal transformation and creative breakthroughs. Get ready to pause, reflect, and tap into the wisdom that emerges when we dare to be silent. And if you do enjoy this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation helps us to bring you this podcast, as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We're incredibly grateful and honored by your support. Okay, on with the podcast. We're discussing the rhythms of life. One thing that is a big kind of focal point at the Mount in the recent years has been the cyclical nature of the seasons of life and how these rhythms work. You know, from looking at from the idea of planting and farming and gardening. And we just crossed over the solstice, the longest day of the year. We were just discussing how weird that seems that happens so early in the summer season. It's not even summer yet, but how does that create, in this cycle, this breathe in, breathe out, how does that create, and what is the importance of the silence and the stillness and the taking a break?
Right. Gosh. Well, maybe we could just take a pause now to allow some images to come in response to your request, rather than just sort of go back into my old files and say, oh, yeah, here's one from before. So as you were speaking, what came to mind was this image, because I grew up next to the sea, and I was very aware of the tides, high tide, low tide, and then there's that point when the tide turns. Or the tide's all the way out and it starts to come back in. You can see it sort of rippling in. And I was aware of the tides. And what you've just described with the solstice, you're describing the rhythms of the tides of light and darkness on our planet. So here in the northern hemisphere was the longest day yesterday. For my friends in the southern hemisphere, it was the shortest day. So what happens at that point where it's sort of stretched to its limit, the most light in one day that can be accrued happens on the summer solstice. That's a still point. It hangs in the balance for a microsecond, and that microsecond is eternal because it opens up a portal for something to enter. And so it hangs at that point of poise, that pivotal point of poise. And then, as we experienced yesterday, the sun begins to travel south again. And guess what? The days get shorter from now on, up here in the northern hemisphere. And then that affects us. Oh my gosh, the days are getting shorter. Soon it'll be dark at this time. And so we are affected psychologically, physically by this. I know from my gardening experience, it was full on during the summer. You got up early and you went to bed early because there was a lot happening in the fields. And in the winter, it was an entirely different rhythm because there were different things to do. You weren't planting. You weren't harvesting. You were taking care of things that get taken care of in the winter. And the days were shorter. That didn't mean you didn't work as much. It just meant your rhythm of work was different. So I think that's one way of looking at it. And the other thing, we're recording this podcast today, which is the day of the full moon. And it's the full moon. It's the first full moon in Cancer because this year there are 2 full moons in Cancer. So the next one, next month in July, will be a blue moon because when 2 full moons occur in the same sign in a year, then it's called a blue moon, the second one. So what happens today, later on, when it's and the exact time of the full moon. Something reaches a point of tension and a door opens and energies flow through. It's like an alignment. When you've got all the apertures lined up on all these different discs, when you turn them and they all line up so the openings are aligned, and you have this opening so that cosmic light comes through the solar portal, comes through the planetary portal, comes through the portal of our human mind, and then we receive. So the tradition that we're part of at Meditation Mount talks about 5 days, at least 5 days, for a full moon festival. The first 2 days of preparation, that's getting ready to receive. You just make sure that your receptors are turned on. You do whatever you need to do to prepare for this day. And this day is the day of receptivity, if you like, the day of impression, where you are simply open, like an antenna, like a chalice, to receive. And then the 2 days following the full moon are called days of distribution, because what we're part of is this great circulation. So we prepare ourselves, we receive, and then we pass it on, having added value to it through our good thoughts and our good energy. And that's part of the rhythm. So 2 days of in-breath, 1 day of holding the breath, 2 days of out-breath. That's one way of looking at these rhythms, Joey.
Yeah. And while you were saying that, I was thinking of how incredibly out of sync we are with the natural rhythms. Especially in California here, we don't ever really think about or consciously aware that we're living very differently than most of the world when it comes to the change of the seasons.
Yes.
Yeah. And growing up in the Midwest, you had all 4 seasons, though spring and fall were much shorter. But it was a completely different approach. I mean, like the winters were very cold and the summers were very hot, but it is a different mindset. And it's almost, I'm trying to remember the last time I really thought about winter being winter here in California as I walk around in shorts and a t-shirt.
Exactly. Well, you see, that's the beauty. You can walk around with shorts and t-shirt. But what it doesn't do is remind you of the different qualities of the different seasons. Mm. And you and I recorded a course called Soul Gardening. And one of the sessions of Soul Gardening was exactly this. We talked about there are 4 seasons. You and I grew up where there were distinct seasons. In California, there's sort of the green, and then there's the brown season. Mm. And there's different temperatures associated with it. I'm being a little glib, but it's sort of like that. Now, where I grew up and where I lived in Scandinavia, it was below freezing and dark for over 6 months. Mm. And so the day that the sun started to feel warm and the icicles on the buildings started to melt, everybody stopped. They come out at lunchtime, they sit on benches, they just point their faces to the sun. They became very heliotropic. And everyone got it. And then the long, endless summers, particularly in Scandinavia, where the sun really doesn't set on Midsummer's Day.
It's fantastic. If you've never been there, I highly recommend it. I've been there several times, but I remember the first time I went, and I was on tour with a band, and we were playing festivals, and we were going on at midnight, but it was bright. It was just like middle of the day, and the sun would go down and come up in like a 3 or 4 minute period. It would just dip for a second and then right back up.
Well, let's take that theme a little further, because this is what we touched on in the Soul Gardening course, is that it's natural to go through spring when you plant the seeds, or the seeds germinate. They're actually planted in winter, in the darkness of winter. Psychically, you have your intentions, your New Year's resolutions, whatever you call them. You plant these seeds of intent at the beginning of the year, and then they come up into the light. They are reborn. They resurrect. They resurrect. They regenerate in the spring. And then they are called out by the sun in the summer. And they have this very beautiful, radiant display of all the beauty on the outside that was the promise on the inside of winter. And then there's harvest, where you really appreciate, wow, look at the beauty, and look at the colors, and the colors in autumn or in fall normally turn gold-like. And gold is the color of the soul. It's the color of the harvest. Things turn to gold when they're ripe, when they're ready, when they're mature. And then we take those and we celebrate. And then we go back into winter. And I remember from my farming days is that you think, well, in winter, nothing's happening. Nothing much is happening on the outside, but underneath the ground or inside the seed, the preparation, the light is being focused there to be revealed in the coming seasons. Okay, so that's the natural rhythm. When I was working in what we call corporate America, there weren't 4 seasons in our work life. There were 2 seasons, spring and summer. And it oscillated between spring and summer, which meant somebody told you, we got this project to do, and you started. And then in the summer, you're sort of almost finished. And then, by the way, there's another project we've got to be on. And at the end of the project, nobody said, let's take time to breathe, to celebrate, take time off, have a harvest festival around what we've achieved. And then let's sit down and reflect. What have we learned? What will the seeds for next year be like? What will they contain as far as the light of wisdom from our experience this year? So you have this chance to add to next year based on what you've harvested as far as wisdom and understanding from this year. And so very often you have this sort of ridiculous wheel that you're like a hamster wheel, which is spring and summer, spring and summer. We don't allow ourselves to breathe. And I'm not knocking the corporate life. I'm just saying the way we've set it up is not based on natural rhythms and the expectations. It's always about increasing earnings every quarter. Life doesn't do that. There comes a point where death has to be brought in, stillness has to be brought in order to regenerate and take a turn on the next path of this spiral journey. So I don't know how it is for you living in California, how you claim that space to honor the natural seasons, the psychological seasons as well as the physical seasons, but and even maybe as some religions, and on the Sabbath they rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I have been trying to incorporate keeping. This is something I've been doing for about the past year, is trying to keep Saturday as a day of minimal activity. And it's really helped to actually try to, whether you call it a true day off, or, I do a lot of meditation and a lot of sort of exploration on Saturdays. That's kind of my day to try to recover. And that's really helped. I do think it's interesting, especially, a lot of things out here in California, it's kind of the skunk works lab of human consciousness in America. But I think it's interesting that more and more people, especially in my circle, are trying to do silent retreats, and they're trying to find that silence that would generally you'd find in the winter. That is one thing that I do miss out here, is in the winter in the Midwest, when it's dark and cold at night, it's very quiet. Even in the city, like there's a sort of, especially if there's snow, it sort of dampens the sound, and you hear and feel a different kind of energy. And I think it's important to at least try to replicate, if not the conditions, then the state of mind that you get into, the reflective kind of, so you can kind of reevaluate and find, because the day-to-day grind tends to tear away at your attention, your focus. You're always being pulled in different directions, but kind of reset your North Star for the upcoming season.
Yeah, thank you. I love that example. And I also attempt to do something similar. Because if I don't have this time to pause and open up a space in the now, then I just replay my old golden orders. And I just sort of repaint and repolish things that have gone before. I don't regenerate. I regurgitate. It's a big difference between regeneration and regurgitation.
That's a big one. And it's interesting because you said that right before we started, you wanted to see you wanted to kind of clear the deck and see what came through.
Yeah, because I bring a little, a 3x5 card with me with some notes on. Today, I held it up. Joe isn't sure. It's absolutely blank.
Yeah.
So my note today is a blank piece of paper. That's my reminder. Mm-hmm. I didn't write silence. No, because the blank piece of paper is itself the reminder of being a blank mind. Mm-hmm. A blank mind doesn't mean you don't know anything. It just means it's clear to receive new signals.
So important too, in the idea of the child's mind of approaching a new project, and that's something that I strive to do whenever I attack a new kind of problem, learn a new skill, is try to adopt that child's mind and not be afraid to make mistakes, not be afraid to look at things in a new way without preconceived ideas.
Well, it goes back to the Buddha's beginner's mind.
Right.
And I remember when we were doing a lot of quality improvement and major factory processes in my corporate career, we realized that you had to have these times to change the things. Otherwise, you just keep going and going and going. And this beginner's mind, there was this wonderful saying that we came across because we were working with the Japanese, that in the expert's mind, there are few possibilities, while in the beginner's mind, there are many. The expert already knows. So there's a fine balance between being wise and thinking you already know. Then you're maybe not as open to receiving new impressions. Hey, I know that. I mean, look, I've got a doctorate. I've got this. I got this covered. And what you've covered up, though, is the lens, the aperture that opens to allow the light of new wisdom to come through.
Yeah, it's the kind of the idea between an inventor and like maybe an engineer. You know, an inventor is trying to think up new things, where maybe an engineer is trying to apply tried and true methods to, and then obviously you need a mixture of both. But it's important to encourage your inventor's mind, because everyone is creative. Which sometimes we forget that too, especially in the hustle and bustle of life. You forget that how creative we are as people.
Right. And what happens when you're at a major turning point, whether it's a full moon or the solstice or the equinox, or the shift between two major ages, the Piscean age and the Aquarian age, there is a point of stillness where new energies are about to come in. It's said that next year, 2025, we will be influenced more powerfully by the energy of the fourth ray, harmony through conflict. So it will heighten all the tensions and hopefully bring us to resolution at a higher point of synthesis. It will also usher in the new renaissance artistically. That's it. That's the gift of this ray. Now that happens next year, astrologically, we're told. But we'll be bathed in this fourth ray. So when that happens, new possibilities are available to us. But unless we're open to standing in the light of something new, nothing will happen. We won't take advantage of it.
Right. Yeah. That's the big key. How do you, I think that also, that seems like the importance of silence, is being able to get yourself into a frame of mind where you can be open to new ideas, because now more than ever, there is just so much chatter, so much information, so much data that, the concept of a digital detox wasn't even a thing like it's important.
If you look at the digital chatter, I mean, that's a collective monkey mind.
Mm. Yes, it is. Yeah, and it's the closest thing to an addiction that I have these days. I find myself being like, oh my God, which is 2 hours just went by.
Well, I've had words with myself recently.
I have too.
Michael, stop doing YouTube after a certain time at night, or don't do it. Not today. No, this is a subtle addiction.
Yeah.
What you need to do is to open your heart and open your mind to be impressed by the soul, which is living to bless you with new wisdom. Mm-hmm. Not dying to bless you with new wisdom, but living to bless you with new wisdom, which brings us to meditation. Why is stillness such an important part of meditation? Because in the stillness, we can set up this alignment between our soul and its incarnated agent, the Joeys and Michaels as we see in this human form. And in the stillness, we connect, like we bring ourselves into resonance. And when you have this resonant alignment, you're online. And your internet is stable. Mm. And therefore, in the silence, you establish communications. And it's also said, I think we've mentioned it before in several of the podcasts, that silence is the synthesis of all sound. Out of the silence comes everything. Out of the white light comes all the colors. Out of the one word comes all of creation.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a time when we allow ourselves to pause, to be open, and receive a new impulse from life itself.
For me, this has been incredibly important. I'm coming up on about 1,000 days of morning meditation, which is a big deal for me because it was always the hardest thing for me to do, to sit still for even a moment. But doing it first thing when I wake up every day has completely changed everything. And it allows for that. For me, it allows the changing over of the dream energy, the night energy. I usually would wake up with it seems like every channel on the radio was on at the same time.
Yeah.
Like that's how it feels when I'm sleeping. It doesn't feel restful. But being able to sort of transmute that into actual silence. And then it allows me to then take the new energy of the day and start off in a place that this has been absolutely unattainable for me in my entire life. I didn't even know that this possibility existed. Oh. And then when I started meditating, just, as someone that, has been diagnosed with ADHD and all these different things, all these different alphabet diagnoses, the idea of just being able to sit for 5 minutes was just unfathomable. And that was the hardest thing in the world. And doing that and just starting out 5 minutes a day, I did that for a month, and then I went up to 10 minutes and did that for a couple months. And then I'm finally up to about 25. And it makes all the difference in the world. It's creating that little silence, and it allows the new energy to go, old energy to go, new energy to come in.
Well, it also stops the automatic response of waking up and acting upon your lists, your to-do list.
Right. Yeah.
You talked about the example of it felt like there were many radio stations broadcasting at once. Mm-hmm. This is really interesting because a similar example was given by Eileen Caddy, one of the co-founders of the Findhorn community in northern Scotland. It came about in 1962. I lived there for 14 years and I knew Eileen and Peter and Dorothy, the co-founders. And Eileen talked about when the whole of Findhorn was guided by this inner alignment to the soul. And she described when she first heard what she named as the still small voice. She said, it was like every day when I was meditating, there were all these radio stations playing at once. Mm. And then I focused and decided to listen to the one radio station that was broadcasting from my true self. And very slowly, they all fell away until there was one station playing. And When that station was on air, it said, "Be still and know that I am God." 8 little words.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she was given. Be still and know that I am God. That was her way of making sure she was tuned into the right station.
Mm-hmm.
That was its call sign.
Yeah.
And that really touched me deeply. And so out of the stillness comes all movement. The stillness is the aperture between worlds.
Yeah.
You've got to create the space for it to enter. And what you just described was your way of making sure that your life that day and each day is as much aligned to what your soul is inviting you to do, rather than trying to take care of all the things that you created in the should-dos and have-to-do lists. Sometimes in old ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then that back to the hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very important thing, especially for me, is consciously avoiding being stuck in that pattern. Because as someone that is both struggles with patterns and absolutely needs structure, it's easy to fall into the bad patterns. And for me, it's being mindful and intentional is important.
Well, because what you've created in your life is a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, I go back to the Findhorn community. One of the people who was there and watched over us was R. Ogilvy Crombie. He was the one that had the deep relationship with the elemental beings of nature. He was also a trained magician. And he was very, very aware of what it takes to just be vigilant and to create a space. And there are so many stories that can be told here, and I'm aware I don't want to go into storytelling mode, because I feel that this is a more receptive and reflective session that we're doing today, Joey. But I'm just thinking of all the examples of you have to stop, open, receive, register, respond. And that's it. Otherwise, it's always a repeat performance. It's not new.
I've also heard, just touching on that for a second, the idea of magic as imagination, and it's allowing your imagination to, again, like energy follows thought. You're coming up with this mental model, this mental idea, and if it's like trying to paint on a canvas that has a bunch of stuff already on it. You need to be able to clear that canvas and clear your mind so that you can come up with an idea that's workable. And I do find it interesting that one of the things I love about California, in both Northern and Southern California, is the idea economies. You can come up with an idea in your garage, and 2 years later, it's an entire economy.
It's like a garage band, isn't it? A mind.
Yeah, or a startup, or or just something. That someone comes up with an idea and starts writing it down on paper, and a couple of years later, it becomes a movie, or becomes a TV show, or becomes a new company, or and then. But this all starts with that blank piece of paper, that blank canvas.
Right. And you talked about inspiration and imagination. Imagination is a realm of what's called cosmic ideation, where these seed thoughts that live inside the heart and mind of the being in whom we live and move and have our being exist. It's like a sphere of possibilities, magnetic seeds. And then when we're open to receive, and we want to be inspired, we attract, by our striving and our desire, we attract these seeds into us, and we have an idea. And that idea then starts to germinate inside us, and it germinates inside us in the stillness. And then it comes out. Each project has its own cycle of germination, of course. But it's this notion of being receptive, creating a field that can receive new impressions. And we've used this example before, Joey. At some point, you have to shake the Etch-a-Sketch box. And to clear up all the scribble and the graffiti and all the things that you've done over the past years, start with a blank screen. And then allow intuition and inspiration to flow. I mean, that for me is really, really important.
I mean, I think it's okay to maybe think about this too. When we talk about where these ideas are coming from, there's the idea of a sort of the realm of the ideal, and the realm of all these different records and cosmic ideas, and it's almost like we're these sort of antennas or receiving, like our brains are these receptors, and we can farm these ideas. But can you talk maybe a little bit more about where, if we are one system, where is this coming from? Where are these ideas coming from? This inspiration, like where is the muse speaking from?
It's speaking from its own level of receptivity and ability to register and ability to radiate. We go back to in the beginning was the word. In the beginning was the original dream. That dream breathed itself out. It's like you said, you wake up from the dream state and you go into your daily thing. Okay, at some point, the creator, if we're going to use this analogy, the creator stretched and woke up from the dream and said, okay, this is a new day. Let's put my dreams into action. Let me breathe them out. Let me sound it forth. And then that rippled through, and those beings and that aspect of itself that could responded. And then it cascaded. It's like inside this nested universe. And so it isn't as though somebody somewhere is telling us what to do. If we truly believe that we are, as we said before, a fractal of this one life, we are an incarnated, co-creative agent of life, then when we're open to life, life speaks to us, life speaks through us. And it comes from the deeper dimension of ourself that is not yet fully realized. It comes from life itself. Now, that's a hard notion to wrap your head around if you still believe in a you and a me and an I and something else. But when you realize that it's the one in time and space getting to know itself. It's like, there's a song there, Getting to Know You. But,
that's right.
But that's how I see creation. And therefore you have, at every level of this nested universe, you've got beings who are mercurial messengers. They carry the seed thoughts. But it isn't they tell you what to do. The seed thoughts are pixels of this dream of the Creator. And it's up to us to respond to them, be inspired. And as you say, like a garage band, you pick up your part and go, oh, I'd like to do something with that. I'd like to create an art project. I'd like to create a business. I'd like to create this. I'd like to create a world that works for all. So you pick up on what's been seeded, and what's been seeded is an encapsulation of the dream. The dream is that which we can't speak about. It's unspeakable. It's unspeakable, but it was spoken forth by the word. And it's up to us then to reproduce that word in our own way until everything around us is, to the best of our ability, the dream realized. And I go back to one of the Japanese phrases that we used in the quality improvement movement, is that a dream without, or an idea or a vision without action is a daydream. And action without vision is a nightmare.
Yeah.
You've got to have both.
You do.
You've got to have action, you've got to have vision. You've got to have the dream, and you've got to have the waking state. You can't just dream away your life. The dream is to inform you and to inspire you into action. Because manifested world is the outer activity of these inner ideals. The Word made flesh.
Yeah. Something you said earlier, maybe you can expand a little bit about, and just what is that, like the fourth ray being harmony through conflict coming in the next year? On its surface, that can sound kind of scary, harmony through conflict. That's it's a concept that's esoterically significant, but not a lot of people maybe understand quite what that is.
Well, let's define conflict. Conflict can be a warlike state between two nations or two people, or many people, many nations. What we're talking about, it's the tension between the two poles and how you resolve that tension creatively, which is why we've mentioned that point of synthesis where you resolve the 2 points on the baseline of a triangle and you bring those 2 opposing points to a higher place of synthesis, the apex of the triangle. And that synthetic meeting place at the top of the triangle contains both. So the 2 are really reunited. So harmony through conflict is how you bring beauty out of disorder, how you bring peace out of conflict. So it's not just about stopping wars. It is about using the creative pole of the cosmic magnet to bring beauty into the world. If we were just on a planet which is bathed in light all the time, we wouldn't have the same development of consciousness. Consciousness is only developed as it experiences the ebb and flow of light and dark. I'm not talking about good and evil, I'm talking about light and dark. When the life force lives under the ground, in the winter and early spring, and when the life force is more visible and shows itself above the ground in the summer and in the fall, and then goes back underground. So it's about coming in and out of manifestation. I'm not sure if that addressed what you said. Maybe you could open it up further.
Can you maybe explain a little bit about how's that significant about the fourth ray?
Well, the fourth ray, because it's a bridging ray. Number 4 is always the midpoint in the 7, and the 7 colors, as we've said before, come out of the one light through the prism or the triangle, and they're split into the 7 rays, the rays that we know as the rainbow. Every time you see a rainbow in the sky, it's because the sun has then been refracted through the moisture in the air, this prism, and it shows up as a rainbow. It projects itself on the outside of everything it contains on the inside in its whiteness and its brightness. And so the fourth ray connects spirit and matter. The fourth ray connects the 3 major rays of aspect, the first, second, and third rays, with the 3 rays or the 4 rays of attribute, and the fourth ray being the first. It's how the 3 colors, the primary colors, if you like, mix and make all these magnificent variations and just an infinite palette. There is no limit to how you can combine the 3 primary colors. I mean, if you look at nature, how many shades of green are there, Joey?
Yeah, so many. It's really amazing.
So that's what the fourth ray calls forth that, and it helps birth, if you like, a civilization, because you and I have named this before, that we believe that the arts form the carrier wave for the Renaissance, and the Renaissance will be the rebirth of the human spirit in form. That's what a Renaissance is. So you look back at the last Renaissance, and particularly in Italy, the beauty that came out of that through the artists, where they were sculpting things or painting things or singing things, it was a revealing of the beauty, and it was a new lease of life. Before, it was a little bit more clunky. So we're about, I believe, to enter a new Renaissance. with the fourth ray helping us. Now, what new forms of beauty are going to be revealed on earth through, that's what I'm looking at. Not it'll stop wars. No, we'll have an opportunity to utilize the fourth as a bridge between the polarities to resolve conflict. But more importantly, it will help us to give birth once again to the Holy Trinity that the Greeks named truth, goodness, and beauty. See, truth, goodness, and beauty can only come about when the light moves through that prism into daily life, when you get the rainbow colors of that. And the fourth ray allows the colors to play with each other and create new forms. That's sort of my interpretation.
It seems rather interesting that all the projections for what's going to be happening in the next year, like 2025 is going to be a banger. This idea of a renaissance, I mean, they're already calling the AI renaissance coming up is in the next 2 years. So I think that's pretty interesting how that lines up, because it can be the distillation of finding the truth and beauty.
It's the revelation. Yeah. It's a new opportunity for revelation. That's what the Renaissance says. Renaissance is rebirth. And what does rebirth do? It creates forms that are better equipped to express what's on the inside, the promise. So a Renaissance allows you to move closer to a golden age. And the golden age is, like we said before, gold is the color of harvest. The golden age is when all the promise has germinated, has grown, and has ripened and matured. And the ideals and principles that you believe in as the basis of your society are shining, are in place. It's a golden age. And then guess what? It starts to fade and break down, because what? That has to be recreated to create new forms that can express it even more. So it isn't as though, well, what was wrong with that golden age? Every golden age is only a partiality, is only a partial age of the achievement of realization. That's why we have to keep recycling it. Not because it was bad, because it's not the whole thing. This is this progressive progress or progressive seasons of life as we move through each incarnation or each season, the winter, the spring, the summer, and the fall. Each phase allows more to be revealed. And then you have these major points of change, which we're at now, between these two, the Kali Yuga and Satya Yuga, between the Piscean age, the Aquarian age. And we're coming up to this shift now where we have the opportunity to create forms that will reveal more beauty. And if we're not aligned to that, what we will do is we'll create more forms that bind us to the wheel of rebirth, as the Buddhists would say. We'll go deeper into matter. We will become indebted. We will mortgage ourselves.
What does that mean, going deeper into matter? I mean, that...
Deeper into matter, once again, there's nothing wrong with matter, because matter is martyr, is mother. I'm talking about, as we said before, these periods of light and dark, when spirit needed to experience itself, it needed to be incarnated, and it used the forces of evolution to enter into matter. Now, the seed can't live in the darkness forever. At some point, it has to be called forth and quickened and search for the sun, for the light of truth. What's happening now on our evolutionary journey, the spiral that we're on now, is we're being called not just to return to the light, but also to release the light that is matter itself. We've named this in previous broadcasts, but occultly, matter is called black light. And the release of atomic energy was really releasing the light within matter in a very crude way. Now, how can you release the light of love within the material substance of this world? Well, you do it through fusion, through joining hearts, through harmony, through compassion, through empathy. We touched on this a couple of podcasts ago. Empathy is the way you come into a state of connection with people. If I have empathy with you, I'm connected. If I'm connected, I can fuse with you. And when you have energy release through fusion, it's very different from energy release through fission. So I would say that the whole thing of the liberation from the attachment to matter and then the liberation of the light within matter, nothing is bad here. Matter and darkness are not bad, but there comes a point where the winter's not bad, but it's springtime. You got to go with the flow, man.
Yeah.
Don't swim against the tide.
That's right.
These cosmic tides are really powerful. You try and swim against them.
They are powerful, I'll tell you that.
They have some incredible riptides.
Yeah.
And that's what we're experiencing at the moment. We've created a distortion in the field, which are like these huge psychological riptides. We're getting pulled out to sea.
Yeah, I feel that.
So,
yeah.
Return to stillness.
Yeah, find your center. Return to stillness.
Embrace tiger, return to mountain.
Yes. Find your breath. These are all important tools. There's hang tough, hold tight. It's the ride's not over yet. Just
right. But you can hang tight by hanging loose.
Mm-hmm, that's true. It's those two poles of opposition.
Right.
And you find that center.
Well, it's funny because I was out walking yesterday and I do this circuit, this loop. I'm going round and round in this loop. And I think, Michael, this is a mindless exercise and it's a mindful exercise. It's both mindless, I don't have to think, but it's mindful because I'm aware of what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, what we're talking about, the still space. You enter a space where you're mindful, but your mind is not full of what you're doing. It's becoming aware of becoming aware without identifying with the one who's just become aware that they're aware.
Mm-hmm.
Sound of one hand clapping, man.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good place to kind of take a breath and return to silence, I think. Well, man, it's a lot to kind of think about. And
well, silence allows us to digest as well.
Yeah.
It isn't that it's just a place to receive, but in silence we can digest and assimilate, and then what we have harvested really turns to the gold of wisdom. And that's how we learn and grow. In breath, out breath, and in between the breaths. This point of poise, this point of stillness. This magical place.
Yeah.
It's called the now.
Yeah. The power of now. Yeah. This holy moment. All right.
That goes on forever.
That's right.
It's the eternal now.
Yeah. Ah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Joey. Appreciate it.
I'll see you next week.
Bye.